Octopath Traveler is a story-driven JRPG that takes place on the continent of Orsterra. Orsterra is a not-so-sprawling continent that manages to fit 8 unique biomes within its confines. Now, as I was wandering throughout the different regions of Orsterra, going from the deserts of the Sunlands to the high mountains of the Highlands, I began to wonder something. How realistic is Orsterra? Octopath Traveler takes place in a fictional world, but Orsterra and its many stories are developed under a real-world veil. There are people which populate cities which spot the many different regions of the land. So, it is therefore reasonable to expect the layout of the world to corroborate with real-world geographical laws. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at the map of Orsterra and determining how realistic it is. The topics I will cover include basic geography, biomes and climates, human settlement, and ecosystem logic. But before I get started, one important thing to keep in mind is that game developers generally make a map to fit their video game, not a video game to fit their map. What I mean by that is game developers and map creators will use techniques like selective realism and exaggeration to make their games more fun. Imagine, for a moment, a game map that was actually the size of the United States. It would take you 6.5 hours to get from Pierre, South Dakota to Lincoln, Nebraska, just to be a 25th of the way done with your capital's quest log. So, developers use techniques like these to shrink the size of their worlds and make the player experience enjoyable without sacrificing the logic of the geography. Alright, basic geography is just about the simple stuff. Let's start with water. There are 2 oceans either side of the continent, which you can figure out the names of if you find yourself chatting to as many NPCs as I did, and a large lake in the center. I searched everywhere I could, and I also did some research, and the lake does not have a name. This is so sad. An interesting note is the only place on the entire map where there are rivers is the Riverlands, and I have to say I am impressed. Each of these rivers has its own initial source, which is good. There are also a few examples of bifurcation here, which is when a river splits into 2 different streams. In fact, both distributaries of this bifurcation go on to have their own bifurcations. Another nice touch is this river delta. A river delta is where the end of a river meets a lake, and is generally a place that creates fertile land and a diverse ecosystem. You know, the kind of place you would want to visit in a video game, for example. Unfortunately, you can't actually visit this location, which is a shame, but I like the little details like this anyways. I will say that these 2 spots here are less realistic. I don't believe there's a natural reason for a river to split and then merge with itself again. The water should just follow the quickest path downwards and stick to that. Another accurate feature is the vegetation. The frostlands are covered in snow, the flatlands are covered in a thin layer of yellow-green grass, the mountains of the highlands are bare while the bases of the ranges are covered in lush grass. All the vegetation is done well, which isn't surprising. This game was developed by Square Enix and ended up being a major release on the Nintendo Switch in 2018, so the fact that the basics were covered should be a given. It would have been more surprising if details like these were poorly done, especially considering the fact that this map was made by Francesca Berold. Francesca is an extremely talented artist who has made hand-drawn art for a plethora of different card games, video games, and books. When talking about the map of Orsterra, she talks about how she was able to keep the map alive, and I think she hits the nail on the head here. When you're forced to zoom in and focus on the intricate details of each region, it allows the overall map to feel like it has so much more detail. Francesca did a great job with the hand drawing of this map, but now that we have gone over the basic geography of the land as well as the cartographic details of the map, it's time to move on to the actual climate of the world. I have already mentioned that there are 8 different regions in Orsterra, and you have probably already noticed that there are some proverbial lines in the sand when it comes to these regions. I mean, there are literally dotted lines on the map to show the separate regions. Ideally, there would be some sort of transition climate between 2 areas, like maybe a taiga biome between the woodlands and the frostlands, but that isn't the case here. The lack of transition climates between these regions is a minus in the realism category, but not in the immersion category, thanks to some clever storytelling. According to the Order of the Sacred Flame, which is the predominant religion in Orsterra, the land was created by the 13 gods. And who am I to argue with Godspeak? This argument that Orsterra is a godly creation is only influenced more by the lack of latitude logic. The climate of the real world is directly influenced by latitude. Latitude controls how much sunlight reaches a region, which determines temperatures, rainfall, and a bunch of other seasonal patterns. This is why you see certain climate zones like deserts and jungles arranged in bands around the globe. So knowing this, it can be quite jarring to see the climates of Orsterra looking like a dartboard. But despite that, I do like the fact that the sunlands, which is the only desert of the realm, are formed behind the rain shadow of the highland mountain ranges. Mountain ranges block all moisturized air and create arid climates behind them. Now, if we were to believe that this desert was formed due to the previously mentioned rain shadow, it also tells us something interesting about the actual globe that Orsterra exists in. Because the desert is west of the highlands, that would mean that general weather patterns on Orsterra move from east to west. In our world, weather patterns generally move from west to east due to the natural rotation of the Earth. But if Orsterra has weather patterns that move in the opposite direction, it also means that their world rotates in the opposite direction. Those are the kinds of details you can uncover when working with geography, and I just think the fact that the sun rises in the west on Orsterra is pretty freaking cool. Now, there is no concrete proof that this is true, and the regions could just be aligned this way because God desired it to be so, but I like my theory better. Ultimately, the climate of Orsterra provides many contradictions, and while it might lack a little bit of realism, there are at least some lore reasons behind the decisions that the developers made. While there might have been some question marks presented to us in the climate category, I was thoroughly impressed when it came to this game's towns. Some of you might remember a history class in high school that covered Mesopotamia, a land of historical human significance that was formed between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Or maybe you remember the California Gold Rush, which was responsible for the formation of many cities west of the Mississippi River. The point is that humans need resources, and so they settle where there are resources, and if they don't, then there must be some valid reason as to why they settled there. All this to say that almost every town in Octopath Traveler is given reason to be. Some are immediately noticeable, like Rippletide being a trade outpost, and Wellspring being formed around the desert oasis. Others are understood better after some exploration, like Flamesgrace, which was formed because of its proximity to the Cave of Origin, a prominent landmark for the Order of the Sacred Flame. Overall, I was very impressed with the towns I found in Orsterra, but another important part of human settlement is the roads we travel on. The paths in Orsterra are all carved into the earth, no gravel roads or anything like that. The simple road design means that the roads should follow the easiest terrain, and when looking at the map, we can see that this is true. They wind through the clearings in the forests, around the cliffs in the clifflands, and the mountains of the highlands. I love this design choice because it tells me that the people of Orsterra made a conscious decision to have their roads made this way. Sure, you could imagine how much quicker you could get from Swarky to Victor's Hollow if there was some extravagant road that went straight through the forest, but they chose not to. You can dream up your own reasons behind this, but whether they didn't have the resources, the money, or they just valued the land too much, it is still a testament to the world design that we were able to make an analysis like this because of the map. On a first playthrough of Octopath Traveler, you are likely to notice the many different types of enemies that scatter the land. I certainly did. And because you will be doing a lot of fighting along your travels, you are likely to get a full idea of an area's ecosystem while completing a chapter of a character's story. I started my adventure as Cyrus, whose story starts in the Flatlands region. As I exited Atlas Dam and crossed the bridge to the Flatlands, I encountered ants of the antagonistic variety, giant sheep, and various tumbleweeds. Then, as I headed north to meet with Ophelia in the Frostlands, I encountered various canines, lizardmen, and a magnificent penguin. The point is, every region is full of its own unique creatures. Some big, some small, some common, and some rare. An ecosystem is best when it is diverse, and Orsterra is as diverse as it gets. Now, yes, I am aware of the fact that the only creatures you ever encounter on Orsterra are for the purpose of battle. And so the developers had to make plenty of interesting enemies to fight, because that's what RPGs have to do. But who cares? I don't, especially if it makes the world that much more interesting. Okay, I got a little sidetracked there, but the point is, ecosystem diversity is good. But is it realistic? The desolate clifflands are filled with numerous birds. The woodlands house wolves and rabbits. The sunlands are crawling with snakes and scorpions. There are mountain goats, and the highlands and the coastlands have slugs, conches, and flying fish. It is beautiful. We have learned that the ecosystems of Orsterra are not only diverse, but also very realistic. And Orsterra dips not just its toes into realism, but dives head and shoulders into it. We explored the map of the world, its people, the climate, the ecosystem, and it has all turned up aces. Now, what matters most when it comes to world design for a video game is its immersion. Video games are fictional for a reason, and like any other form of media, they are just trying to entertain. But because Octopath Traveler has a realistic setting, I felt it necessary to explore the world. I mean, Orsterra is set in its own time period. The land has its history. I mean, there's a calendar, for goodness sakes, with actual days of the week. Immersion is great, and necessary to gaming. But I believe realism adds a level of self-insertion into a game that is unmatched. It is probably unsurprising to you to find out that I enjoy games more on the realistic side of the fictional scale rather than the fantasy side, and this exercise has certainly been a testament to that. But I do hope you guys enjoyed. This has been Two Tones, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, Two Tones here. If you like hearing me talk and want to hear more of me, go ahead and check out my Instagram, TwoTones17. I'll leave a link in the description and in my bio if you want to hear me yap more about classic rock.